Thank you very much, Gladwell, and good morning, everybody. First of all, I must congratulate AfriCOG, the fabulous work you're doing in terms of governance, and also to thank Bashira for the analysis which you've done. I think it's really brought in some things which we need to start thinking about how we can handle ourselves better in terms of this fight of corruption and governance issues. And I also like to recognize my eminent friends, and I think people continually trying to bring our conscience every time about these issues. And I recognize John Gidongo, David D., and I'm sure many other people who are here on that score. And I am very much honored that you'd want to hear my humble views. And Gladwell, you've agreed that I was just don't have a speech to make, but just a reflection to give you about, it's now 8 years I'm going to go out of the office, and some people might want to ask me, in retrospect, what would you like to see, and what can you say about all these issues? Yes, today Bashira has talked about the state capture. From where I sit and from my thing, I will then bring another theory, the theory of budgeted corruption. Yeah, and the theory of budgeted corruption, if you can imagine the Thika Highway, we are starting here from Nairobi and we are going to Thika. And the highway, it's got several lanes, and the most important thing is the exits. So everybody plans the journey, and they know as the cars start off, each one knows where it's going to go. And that's what I'm trying to liken with this issue, what I say, it's a theory of budgeted corruption. And that basically says that is our budget actually loaded with corruption? Because if it is, then it means it fits the theory of a highway, because you agree on it from Nairobi, but you know exactly where which exit is going to be taken. Yeah, and who is waiting? So once its exit is gone, whatever little which is staying there, we reach Thika, but we reach in another governance system altogether. So this is where I'm really concerned, that really, are we in a situation where our budget is loaded with corruption? That means that it jives with what you call the state capture. And I think once you look at it, then you say, who are these potential players in all this, in that highway and in Nairobi, who then will have to send the cars off to Thika and arrive there? And who are the people who can trace the cars out of the exits? That's the point. That's the point which I'm trying to raise today. And if it is indeed budgeted corruption, then our budget making is something which we must start looking at very strongly. Because I think in the new Constitution 2010, it was to take the budget making out of sort of treasury to make it more our budget through the parliament. The parliament is actually supposed to be the one who decides on the cake. Yes, how it's going to be divided, even as it goes along the highway. And I think also the 2010 Constitution actually recognized that you need to have strong checks and balances. First of all, the cake, how it is baked, and then how it's going to be appropriated or divided between the two levels of government. That's fine. But the point here is the institutions which we created, several institutions were created in order to ensure that the checks and balances in the system is there. And at the cake sharing level, we have, I would liken the CRA, the Commission of Revenue Allocation was put there to be an independent overseer in how we divide the cake between the two levels of government. But more importantly is to take away that cake making from an over-concentrated, which was concentrated in the former system, in, say, in the treasury system. And also to avoid our system of, issues of using the budget as a political thing. Then there is another office which was created, which was supposed to be control of the budget. And then you have my offices and other independent offices. In other words, the Kenyans were very clear that the cake, as it leaves the station from Nairobi, we want it controlled. So has that really been happening? Has we done? So the first thing is that we really have not reached that stage yet. Because what was meant to have happened, and in my view, just as the internal checks between the division of the cake, there was going to be a division of authority between the treasury and the processes of that process going through the Thika Highway. And that's why we set up, I believe, we set up the control of the budget. So the control of the budget was really meant to take over once the processes of baking the cake is finished. From day one, 1st of July, they would take control and then control the processes. And that means that, first of all, did we capacitate this control of the budget to do that? I believe we have not, because nothing has changed from the original, what you call, straightforward national, the unitary government from the two levels of government which we desire to have. Because the control of the budget was really meant to, once the budget has been done, everything else, I believe, from the exchequer, everything else should have gone to the control of the budget. Right now, I think the control of the budget, I would say, is doing a good job, but it's giving us more statistical accountability than what we really desired. We desired that once the budget has been and the cars have been set off, the controller of the budget takes care of those cars and say the car is left as it is now being spent or it is moving along the thick highways. Is the control of the budget was supposed now to say the budget is there, the exchequer is there, you release it, and there it goes. So that control of the budget would be doing a more important control. I think we failed in that because we still are in the unitary system because the budget is still controlled, although you imagine it is backed by the parliament, but it is very much still controlled in a unitary system, which is therefore the question begs about the corruption and the potential of budgeting, and therefore the internal checks which we intended has not been realized. And that's a very major thing which we have to revisit, even those who are clamoring for revisit of the Constitution, whether the control of the budget is doing that. Because if the controller of the budget was doing that, then even if you had budgeted it, it would be stopped. It would not find its way. You do not find an exit along the thick highway. So, and that is very important because I come and audit during the cars when the cars are moving, and we are trying to make sure that we are also fighting, we are contributing this fight by making sure that we are doing work which is responsive and resonating with the ordinary person on the ground. In other words, we are doing more timely work and basically leveraging on technology here. Now, the other second thing is the system of the highway which we are looking at, the thick highway. We had a very good system which that highway was called IFMIS, you know, the IFMIS system, and that's the highway. Once we set the car, this system was meant to block any cars going out. So the question is it really blocking the cars going the exits which they shouldn't go, or reaching thicker, so to speak, reaching the ground where it is responding to our needs as citizens, and responding to the issue of delivery on the ground? I think that's another question we must look at, because the system was actually also conceived to be a unitary system. But we then gave ourselves a constitution which is supposed to be delivery-based, and which was very clear that there's two levels of government. There's a national government and the county government. But then you have a system which is unitary, interposed on a system which is these two distinct levels of government. Is it time that we should now actually revisit that system and say, really, we should be having IFMIS 1 and IFMIS 2 for the government, for the national government and the county government? Because some of the things which we are looking at, and also the issues which are now current, begs that question. Is the system that, the unitary system, is it really responding to the devolved system? Because if it was responding to the devolved, we should have an IFMIS 2 which can speak to IFMIS 1, but which is responsive to the budgetary controls which we require at the county level. And also it makes that corruption to be much more. We break down the theory of take a highway in a two level, so that we can control corruption at both the lower level and the upper level. So there is really a need to look at that, because I think being unitary, being concentrated, you then have a system where we reach embarrassing situation where some system, somebody's level 2 is reporting issues which should be related to level 1. I mean, some of the budget codes. And I think those are systemic system which we have, and we have to look at that. And the best thing is that we have the best brains, the best mind, the best youth to look at. This is not a rocket science for us to revisit and cure this and make sure that the controller of the budget becomes a controller. If at all this was the case, that there was control of the budget, certain monies could not move out of the system without the control of the budget knowing. Certain money could not move without the control of, at least if it is going to move, it is subjected to a counter check. But with the system now that certain things can move without the counter checking by the controller, it's really very important. And if we were to look at this and think of some of the big things which are now going, we got the dams, you got others which are there, and the issue of IFMIS, National Youth Service, National NYS, and all this. These things, it is systemic. We have to now look at it. And I say that because of that has failed, and we have not looked at it, we are not addressing the potential, theory of budgeted corruption. The other thing is now really how all this fight against corruption should be looked at. And really, I think the multi-agency teams is doing a fantastic job. I think there's a renewed spirit, and that's good news. And that's the news which I want to say. Really, I see now a lot more closer working of the systems. In other words, the EACC, DCI, DPP, and the Attorney General. I think this system are working. But I think we need now to, apart from it working, solving the day-to-day problems, we must now try and see to what extent can we now let the multi-agencies work in a manner that we can mainstream a serious lifestyle audit, a serious asset recovery system, and link it with a serious revenue collection system. Because I believe the game in that would be also, apart from fighting the corruption, we can be saying we must increase what we take in as taxes. We must increase our tax base, we must recover more, because in so doing we can actually find a working method whereby the lifestyle audit informs a tax system whereby we simply tell you, look, Mr. A, we know where you've come from. You know, you are now having $1 billion, but you cannot explain it. The minute you say you cannot explain it, then we say the tax comes in. 75% of that will come into tax. And we work at that systematically. Imagine the amount of tax revenue we will have to increase. And that has to then mean that the system of investigative system is really looking at more of a lifestyle, you know, on a day-to-day, as a day-to-day, you know, bread and butter issues. And then the KRA also working seriously into recovering the excesses, and together with asset recovery, in a manner that we can then eventually, together with the work which is done on wastage by the Auditor General, we can actually start saying we can have a name in the next 3 years. We want to have a situation whereby we have increased our taxes, our collection taxes so much, and that we have reduced our debt and reduced our wastage. And I believe that we can reach a Kenya whereby a Kenya can actually, this issue of debt can be an issue of the past in a matter of 3 years. If those are, if we respect that. Now, the other area where we need to look at is, and I think this one which I must say that my office is really concerned about, is that we need to audit the shilling, therefore, from the time it is budgeted, recorded, managed, and where it hits the ground. You see, we need to have a system like that. And I think we are now positioning ourselves to make sure that this office should audit the shilling from the time of budget up to where it lands. And that means, obviously, we cannot have enough staff to do that, but we need to find a way of mainstreaming the people, the civil society, in the auditing process. We need to reach a situation whereby we can do work together. We can involve them so that the information comes back from the civil society to feed into the audit process. The output then goes back to increase accountability, to facilitate and empower the people to take accountability at the lowest denominator, and that's the people, and that's the youth. And that's one thing which we must, despite everything we have, we must make sure that this fight is transferred and our systems capacitate the civil society, the people on the ground, with information that they can therefore hold the people accountable, hold us accountable. That's at the county level and at the national level. These are things which it doesn't take big things. It's a question of organization, it's a question of will, a question of decision, and a question of saying we can do it. So I would like to say that really the political will to me right now is alive. I think the multi-agency team is really working very well. And where I sit, I'm leaving office being comforted that the people at these places now are trying to reach out to the office, and we are working very well. Now, that's what I can leave, because I still really feel that, to summarize, we need to question, is the control of the budget doing what is supposed, what was intended? Are there still some functions in Treasury which should be transferred elsewhere to bring the intended, the desired internal checks which were there? And for the investigative institutions, yes, let us continue investigating, but let's get a way of mainstreaming serious, well thought out lifestyle guidelines and audits, which can then lead on to a recovery, asset recovery, and increase our tax base and reduce our debt, and at least build more schools and hospitals. Let me stop there. Thank you very much.